For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained perfect order across 17 star systems. Their advanced civilizations, the crystalline Zephyrians with their quantum minds, the gaseous nebulons who could phase through matter, the mechanical axioms with bodies of living metal, all agreed on one fundamental truth. The galaxy belonged to the evolved, the ascended, the purely rational. Then came whispers from the outer rim. Stories of a primitive species that defied every law of warfare, biology, and common sense. Beings made of mere flesh and bone who somehow survived in the void without environmental suits, who fought with weapons that should have been obsolete millennia ago, who refused to surrender even when facing certain extinction. The Council dismissed these reports as frontier madness, until the day a battered refugee ship limped into their core worlds, carrying impossible footage of creatures that laughed in the face of death, cried over their fallen, and somehow turned hopeless battles into legendary victories through sheer, inexplicable stubbornness. Humans, they called themselves, and they were about to teach the galaxy that evolution had taken a very different path in the forgotten corners of space, a path that led not to transcendence, but to something far more dangerous: unbreakable will. Admiral Kethvar's crystalline form resonated with barely contained anxiety as he reviewed the latest intelligence reports in the command chamber of the Galactic Council's primary fortress station, Nexus Prime. His translucent blue body, normally a calm azure when in deep thought, now pulsed with erratic patterns of orange and red, colors that betrayed his growing unease to any Zephyrian who observed him. The holographic displays surrounding him showed tactical readouts from the Outer Rim territories, each one more disturbing than the last. The Devourer fleet, an ancient mechanical swarm that had terrorized the galaxy for over 2 millennia, had been systematically consuming worlds along the frontier for the past 6 months. Their approach was methodical, relentless, and had never once been successfully repelled by any known civilization. "Sir," came the harmonic voice of his aide, Lieutenant Zarath, her own crystalline body flickering with respectful purple hues. "The evacuation of Kepler 442b is proceeding as scheduled. The Axiom engineers estimate another 48 hours before all valuable resources and populations are extracted." Kethvar's body flashed a sharp spike of irritated yellow. "Another world abandoned to those mechanical parasites. How many does that make this cycle?" 17 confirmed losses, sir. "The mathematical projections suggest the Devourers will reach the core worlds within 8 standard years if their current trajectory continues unchanged." The Admiral's forms dimmed to a deep, contemplative blue. 17 worlds. Billions of sentient beings relocated, their homes stripped bare and left for the Devourers to consume. It was the only logical response: evacuate what could be saved, deny the enemy resources, and maintain strategic depth. Every military academy in the galaxy taught the same doctrine when facing the Devourer fleet: survival through strategic withdrawal. "Has there been any response from the frontier militias?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. The scattered independent colonies along the rim were too primitive, too poorly equipped to mount any meaningful resistance. Most lacked even basic shield technology. "Actually, sir," Zarath's harmonic voice carried an odd frequency, one that Kethvar couldn't immediately identify. "There have been some unusual reports." The Admiral's attention sharpened, his body brightening with curiosity. "Define unusual, Lieutenant." 3 separate incidents in the past week, sir, all involving the same unidentified species. They appear to be..." She paused, her crystalline structure flickering as if processing impossible data, fighting back. Kethvar rotated his primary viewing facet toward his aide. "Clarify, are you suggesting these primitives are engaging the Devourer fleet in direct combat?" "According to the reports, yes, sir." The first incident occurred at Proxima Station, a mining outpost that refused evacuation orders. Long-range sensors detected massive energy discharges consistent with sustained weapons fire lasting over 18 hours. When our scouts arrived to collect debris samples, they found the Devourer advanced elements had been repelled. The Admiral's form flashed through a rapid spectrum of colors: disbelief, confusion, and a hint of what humans might have called hope, though Zephyrians had no direct equivalent for such an emotion. "Show me the sensor data." The holographic display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional tactical map of the Proxima system. Red markers indicated Devourer fleet positions, while blue dots marked the locations of expected resistance points. What Kethvar saw defied every principle of military science he had studied in his 2 centuries of service. The mining station had no significant defensive installations, Zarath explained, highlighting the relevant data streams. Standard asteroid processing equipment, basic habitat modules, maybe 300 inhabitants total. According to our models, the Devourer advance elements should have neutralized the station within minutes. Yet they fought for 18 hours, Kethvar mused, his form cycling through analytical patterns of green and silver. What weaponry did they employ? Surely they must have had hidden military assets. That's where the reports become problematic, sir. Zarath's harmonic voice carried that strange frequency again. The weapons signatures don't match any known technology in our databases. Kinetic projectile systems, primitive chemical explosives, and what appear to be electromagnetic pulse weapons of remarkably crude design. By all theoretical calculations, they should have been completely ineffective against Devourer armor. The Admiral studied the data for several minutes, his crystalline mind processing millions of calculations per second. Nothing added up. The mathematics were wrong, the tactical assessments impossible. The very concept of primitive weapons defeating advanced Devourer technology violated fundamental laws of military engineering. Could this be some form of technological camouflage? Perhaps these inhabitants had access to advanced weaponry disguised as primitive systems? Negative, sir. We managed to recover some weapon fragments from the battle site. The metallurgy is consistent with early industrial age development. Steel alloys, chemical propellants, basic electronics. Primitive by any standard, yet somehow effective enough to drive off a Devourer strike force that included 3 destroyer-class vessels. Kethvar's form pulsed with the deep blue of intense concentration. You mentioned 3 incidents, Lieutenant. Details on the others. The second occurred at a small colony world designated Terra 7 in the Vega sector. The inhabitants appeared to be the same species as those at Proxima Station. The Devourers deployed a standard consumption fleet, 12 vessels including a Harvester-class ship designed to strip mine entire continents. The holographic display shifted again, showing a planet-wide tactical view. Kethvar observed the expected pattern of Devourer fleet deployment. Orbital bombardment positions. Atmospheric entry vectors for ground forces. Systematic consumption zones marked for resource extraction. The colonists had no orbital defenses, no atmospheric shields, no apparent means of preventing surface bombardment. Standard doctrine would have been immediate surrender or evacuation. Instead, Zarath paused, her crystalline structure flickering with what Kethvar recognized as confusion. They attacked the harvester ship. Elaborate. Using modified industrial vessels, sir. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even personal transport craft. They launched a coordinated assault against a vessel 50 times their combined mass, with weapons that should have been incapable of penetrating its defensive shields. Kethvar's form flashed incredulous yellow. Suicidal. Completely irrational behavior. What was the outcome? The harvester ship was destroyed, sir. The humans, that appears to be their species designation, lost approximately 60% of their attacking force, but they managed to disable the harvester's primary systems and cause a cascade failure in its power core. The remaining Devourer vessels withdrew after 16 hours of continuous combat. The Admiral fell silent, his crystalline form cycling through complex patterns of analysis and disbelief. 2 impossible victories. 2 instances of primitive weaponry somehow overcoming vastly superior technology through methods that defied every established principle of warfare. The third incident? He finally asked. Even more disturbing, sir. A human fleet, if it can be called that, intercepted a Devourer raiding squadron in deep space. 23 vessels of various configurations, none larger than a frigate-class ship, against 8 Devourer destroyers and a command vessel. The humans were annihilated, I assume. Negative, sir. After a 12-hour running battle, the human fleet disabled 3 destroyers and forced the remaining Devourer vessels to retreat. Sensor logs indicate the humans employed tactics we've never encountered before. Ramming attacks, weapons fire at point-blank range, and what can only be described as deliberately suicidal maneuvers that somehow resulted in decisive victories. Kethvar absorbed this information, his analytical mind struggling to process the implications. 3 separate engagements. 3 impossible outcomes. 3 victories achieved through methods that violated every principle of logical military doctrine. I want a full analysis prepared for the Council, he finally decided. Include all available sensor data, weapon signatures, and tactical assessments. These humans represent either a significant intelligence failure on our part, or they possess capabilities we don't understand. There's one more thing, sir, Zarath added, her harmonic voice carrying frequencies of uncertainty. We've received a transmission from the human fleet involved in the 3rd engagement. It's unusual. Show me. The holographic display flickered, then resolved into the image of a bipedal creature unlike anything in the Galactic Council's extensive databases. The being appeared to be biological, flesh and bone rather than the crystalline, gaseous or mechanical forms of known civilizations. Its covering appeared to be some form of artificial protection, scarred and battle-damaged, and its facial features were asymmetrical, in a way that suggested either primitive evolutionary development or recent injury. When it spoke, the sounds were harsh and primitive compared to the harmonic tones of Zephyrian communication, or the precise mechanical voices of the axioms. Yet something in those crude vocalizations carried an intensity that made Kethvar's crystalline form involuntarily dim. "This is Captain Sarah Martinez of the Terran Defense Fleet," the creature announced, its small dark visual organs focusing directly on the recording device with unsettling intensity. "We've received your evacuation orders for the Outer Rim colonies." "We're not evacuating. These are our homes, our families, our worlds, and we're going to defend them." The image paused, and Kethvar could see what appeared to be damage to the creature's facial features, cuts, bruises, signs of recent combat. Yet its voice remained steady, determined in a way that defied rational analysis. "To whoever's in charge of your fancy Galactic Council," the human continued, "you can tell them that humanity doesn't run from fights. We've been studying these devourer machines, learning their weaknesses, and we've figured out something your advanced civilizations apparently missed. They can be beaten. They can be stopped. And we're going to prove it." The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at the now empty holographic space where the human's image had been displayed. The silence in the command chamber stretched for long moments before Zaryuth spoke again. "Sir, our xenobiology experts have never encountered this species before. Their physical specifications suggest they evolved in a gravity-heavy environment with significant atmospheric pressure. Their technology appears to be several centuries behind our current standards, yet they've somehow achieved faster-than-light travel and developed weapons capable of defeating devourer forces." The Admiral's form pulsed with deep analytical blue. "How many human worlds are we aware of?" "Intelligence suggests at least 47 confirmed colonies throughout the Outer Rim, with possibly dozens more beyond our sensor range. Population estimates range from 50 million to over 2 billion individuals, though the data is incomplete." Kethvar processed this information with growing amazement. Dozens of worlds, millions or billions of individuals, an entire civilization that had somehow remained hidden from Galactic Council sensors for what must have been centuries of expansion and development. A species that had independently achieved interstellar flight, established colonies across multiple star systems, and developed military capabilities sufficient to challenge the Devourer fleet. "Prepare a long-range reconnaissance mission," he ordered. "I want a full survey of human territories, technological assessments, military capabilities, and population distributions. Use stealth vessels only. These humans may interpret open observation as a hostile act. Shall I also prepare a diplomatic contact package, sir?" The Admiral considered this for several moments, his form cycling through various patterns of contemplation. First contact protocols were well established within the Galactic Council, but they assumed contact with either primitive pre-spaceflight civilizations or advanced species seeking membership in galactic society. Humans appeared to fit neither category. Negative, not yet. These beings have declared their intention to fight the Devourer fleet using primitive weapons and impossible tactics. I want to understand how they've achieved their victories before we make any diplomatic overtures. If they possess some unknown capability that could be applied to our own defensive strategies, he left the thought unfinished, but both Zephyrians understood the implications. The Galactic Council had been retreating from the Devourer fleet for decades, sacrificing worlds and populations to maintain strategic depth. If these primitive humans had discovered some method of actually defeating the mechanical swarms, that knowledge could change the entire course of the war. "There's something else, sir," Zareth added, her crystalline form flickering with what Kethvar recognized as excitement. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures from several human worlds, construction activities, military preparations, fleet movements. They're not just defending their current positions. They appear to be preparing for offensive operations." Kethvar's form flashed brilliant white, the Zephyrian equivalent of shocked surprise. Offensive operations against the Devourer fleet were considered theoretically impossible by every military analyst in the galaxy. The mechanical swarms were too numerous, too well protected, too adaptable to conventional assault tactics. "Show me the sensor data immediately." The holographic display shifted to show a star map of the outer rim, with energy signatures highlighted in various colors indicating the intensity and type of activities detected. What Kethvar saw challenged everything he thought he understood about strategic warfare. The human worlds weren't just building defensive positions. They were constructing massive industrial complexes, launching new vessels at an unprecedented rate, and coordinating fleet movements across multiple star systems. The energy signatures suggested manufacturing capabilities that rivaled the core worlds of the Galactic Council, despite their apparently primitive technology. "How is this possible?" he wondered aloud. "Their metallurgy is centuries behind our standards. Their computing systems are primitive. Their energy generation methods are inefficient by any measure. Yet they're producing military hardware at a rate that suggests a fully developed industrial civilization. The humans appear to compensate for technological limitations through sheer scale and redundancy," Zareth explained, highlighting relevant data points. "Where our civilization might build one advanced facility, they construct dozens of simpler ones. Where we rely on sophisticated automation, they employ massive biological workforces. Their approach is crude but effective." Kethvar studied the tactical implications with growing fascination. The humans had solved the fundamental problem of military production not through technological advancement, but through sheer industrial capacity. They built more ships, manufactured more weapons, and deployed more personnel than their technology level should have been able to support. Estimated time to completion of their apparent military buildup? Based on current construction rates, approximately 6 months for major fleet elements, possibly 3 months for expeditionary forces. "Sir, if their offensive preparations are directed against the Devourer fleet," the Admiral's form pulsed with complex patterns of anticipation and concern. "In 6 months, these mysterious humans intended to launch some form of military operation against an enemy that had never been successfully defeated in over 2,000 years of galactic warfare. They would either achieve something unprecedented in galactic history, or they would be utterly annihilated in the attempt. Continue monitoring all human activities," he ordered. "I want real-time updates on their fleet movements, construction projects, and any communications we can intercept. And prepare a classified report for the High Council. They need to be informed that we may be witnessing either the emergence of a powerful new ally or the most spectacular military disaster in recorded history." As Zareth departed to carry out his orders, Admiral Kethvar remained in the command chamber, his crystalline form dim with deep contemplation. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained order through superior technology, logical planning, and careful resource management. They had built a civilization based on the principles of efficiency, rationality, and calculated risk assessment. Yet these humans seemed to operate by entirely different principles. They fought impossible battles, built crude but effective weapons, and apparently planned to launch offensive operations that every military expert in the galaxy would classify as suicidal. Their approach defied logic, violated established doctrine, and somehow achieved results that sophisticated civilizations could not. Perhaps, Kethvar thought as he observed the distant stars where human worlds continued their mysterious preparations, logic and efficiency were not the only paths to military success. Perhaps there were other qualities, determination, courage, sheer stubborn refusal to accept defeat, that could overcome technological disadvantage and tactical impossibility. In 6 months, he would discover whether the humans represented a new hope for defeating the Devourer fleet, or whether their primitive bravery would simply result in another tragedy to add to the war's already massive casualty lists. But for the first time in decades, Admiral Kethvar found himself actually curious about the outcome of a battle against the mechanical swarms. The humans had promised to prove that the Devourers could be beaten. Soon, the entire galaxy would learn whether that promise could be kept. Captain Sarah Martinez stood on the observation deck of the UTS Defiance, watching the final preparations for what military historians would later call the Proxima Offensive. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see the assembled human fleet stretching across several thousand kilometers of space, over 800 vessels of various classes, from massive dreadnoughts hastily converted from cargo haulers to sleek frigates built specifically for this moment. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just 2 years ago, when humanity's presence in this sector consisted of scattered mining colonies and research outposts. Now, those same colonies had become the foundation of the largest military construction project in human history, churning out ships and weapons with the desperate efficiency that only came when facing extinction. Final count is 843 vessels ready for combat operations, reported Lieutenant Commander James Park, her tactical officer. His face bore the same mixture of determination and exhaustion that marked every human in the fleet. The look of people who had been working 18-hour shifts for months to prepare for this moment. Sarah nodded, her attention focused on the tactical displays showing enemy positions throughout the Devourer-occupied systems. The mechanical swarms had been systematically consuming worlds along the rim for over a year now, their predictable patterns making them easy to track but seemingly impossible to stop. Every conventional military force that had engaged them had either been destroyed or forced into retreat. Any word from Admiral Chen's reconnaissance group? Yes, ma'am. They've confirmed the Devourer fleet compositions in all target systems. Primary objective, the Kepler system, shows approximately 200 vessels, including 6 Harvester-class ships, actively strip-mining the 4th planet. Secondary objectives show smaller task forces but still significant resistance. Sarah studied the intelligence reports with growing anticipation. The Kepler system represented everything wrong with the galaxy's approach to the Devourer threat. When the mechanical swarms had first appeared in that sector, the Galactic Council had immediately evacuated the 3 billion inhabitants and abandoned the worlds to be consumed. Standard doctrine. Logical, efficient, and absolutely unacceptable to human thinking. "What's our intelligence on Devourer tactical patterns?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Humanity had been studying their enemy with obsessive intensity, analyzing every engagement, every weapon signature, every tactical decision made by the mechanical swarms over the past 2 millennia. They rely on overwhelming firepower and technological superiority, Park replied, pulling up detailed tactical analyses. Standard approach involves orbital bombardment to eliminate surface defenses, followed by deployment of ground forces for resource extraction. They adapt to enemy tactics within hours, making conventional strategies ineffective after initial contact. Sarah smiled grimly. Conventional strategies. That was the key phrase that every other civilization in the galaxy seemed unable to move beyond. The Zephyrians with their quantum calculations, the Nebulons with their phase-shifting tactics, the Axioms with their mechanical precision. They all approached warfare as a logical problem to be solved through superior technology and tactical sophistication. Humans approached it differently. Have the engineering teams finished their modifications to the weapon systems? All ships are equipped with the new kinetic penetrators and electromagnetic pulse charges. The nuclear packages are loaded and armed according to specifications. Ma'am, I have to ask, are you certain about the ramming protocols? Sarah turned from the viewport to face her tactical officer directly. Lieutenant Commander Park was a good officer, trained in human military doctrine and experienced in the unconventional tactics that had given humanity its early victories against the Devourers. But she could see the doubt in his eyes, the same doubt that had been expressed by officers throughout the fleet when the battle plans were distributed. James, what did the Galactic Council call our victory at Proxima Station? Impossible, ma'am. Their analysts concluded that our weapons should have been completely ineffective against Devourer armor. And our victory at Terra 7? A statistical anomaly. It couldn't explain how we managed to disable a harvester ship using industrial equipment. The deep space engagement at Wolf 359? Pure luck, according to their reports. They suggested we had somehow exploited a previously unknown technical malfunction in Devourer defensive systems. Sarah nodded. Every single time we've fought these machines, the so-called experts have dismissed our victories as impossible, anomalous, or lucky. They can't understand how primitive human weapons and tactics could succeed where their advanced technology fails. She gestured toward the tactical displays showing Devourer fleet positions. The Galactic Council has been fighting this enemy for 2,000 years using logic, superior technology, and careful strategic planning. They've lost hundreds of worlds and trillions of lives following conventional military doctrine. Park followed her reasoning but still looked uncertain. Ma'am, the ramming attacks were effective in previous engagements because the Devourers weren't expecting such tactics. But they adapt quickly. If we employ the same methods on a large scale, they'll adapt to defend against ramming attacks. Yes, they'll adjust their formations, modify their defensive systems, implement countermeasures specifically designed to prevent close-quarters combat. Sarah's smile became predatory, which is exactly what we're counting on. The captain activated the main tactical display showing the complete battle plan for the Proxima offensive. What appeared on the screen defied every principle of conventional space warfare that Park had studied at the Academy. The human fleet would advance in multiple waves, with the first wave consisting entirely of expendable vessels designed for suicide attacks against Devourer positions. The first wave will employ standard ramming tactics, Sarah explained. The Devourers will adapt their formations to counter this threat just as you suggested. They'll spread their vessels apart, implement point defense systems, modify their engagement protocols to prevent close-quarters contact. Park studied the tactical plan, beginning to understand the true scope of the strategy, which will make them vulnerable to the second wave's long-range bombardment. Exactly. While they're adapting to counter suicide attacks, our dreadnoughts will engage from maximum range using nuclear-tipped kinetic penetrators. The Devourers will then adapt again, implementing countermeasures against long-range bombardment, adjusting their defensive formations to minimize damage from nuclear weapons. The tactical display shifted, showing the projected third and fourth waves of the assault. Park's expression changed from doubt to amazement as he realized the full complexity of the plan. "We're not trying to win a conventional battle," he said slowly. "We're forcing them to adapt so many times that their tactical systems become overloaded." Sarah nodded approvingly. The Galactic Council has been fighting the Devourers using predictable tactics for 2 millennia. Superior technology deployed in logical patterns, following established military doctrine. The machines adapted to counter those methods centuries ago. She highlighted specific elements of the battle plan, showing how each wave of attacks was designed not just to inflict damage, but to force the Devourers into tactical adaptations that would make them vulnerable to subsequent attacks. "Humans don't fight logically," she continued. "We use whatever works, regardless of whether it makes sense to military theorists. We employ suicide tactics, primitive weapons, and strategies that appear completely irrational to outside observers. And every time we do something illogical, the Devourers have to adapt their systems to counter it." The final element of the plan appeared on the display, showing the fifth wave specialized assault ships designed for one specific purpose. Park studied the technical specifications with growing understanding of just how unprecedented this operation would be. "Boarding actions?" he said quietly. "We're planning to actually board Devourer vessels. The one thing no civilization has ever attempted," Sarah confirmed. "Everyone assumes the mechanical interiors of Devourer ships are too hostile for biological life forms, but our analysis suggests those assumptions are based on fear rather than evidence." The tactical display showed detailed schematics of Devourer vessel layouts, painstakingly reconstructed from sensor data and debris analysis. The ships were massive, mechanically complex, and apparently designed around the assumption that no enemy would ever attempt to breach their hulls and fight inside their corridors. "Ma'am, even if boarding actions are theoretically possible, the casualties would be enormous. We're talking about hand-to-hand combat inside enemy vessels using personal weapons against mechanical defenders." Sarah's expression hardened. "James, in the past year, the Devourers have consumed 17 worlds that the Galactic Council abandoned without a fight. That's over 40 billion sentient beings dead, and countless trillions more displaced from their homes. The casualties from our boarding actions will be significant, but they'll be combat deaths fighting for something worthwhile, rather than civilian deaths from abandonment and cowardice." She activated another display, showing the strategic implications of a successful offensive. If we can capture intact Devourer technology, analyze their command systems, and understand their tactical programming, we can develop countermeasures that will benefit every civilization in the galaxy. Park studied the projections with professional interest, his doubts gradually replaced by tactical excitement. The plan was insane by conventional standards, but it was also the first truly offensive strategy anyone had developed against the Devourer fleet in 2,000 years. What's our timeline for the operation? Fleet movements begin in 6 hours. Transit time to the Kepler system is 48 hours, during which we'll continue running tactical simulations and equipment checks. The assault commences immediately upon arrival. We can't give the Devourers time to analyze our approach and develop countermeasures before we begin the attack. Sarah paused, looking out at the assembled human fleet with pride and determination. 800 vessels built by 47 colony worlds in less than 2 years, crewed by volunteers who understood they might not survive the next week, but had insisted on participating anyway. It represented everything that made humanity different from the other civilizations of the galaxy. "There's something else you should know," she added. "We've detected long-range observation platforms monitoring our preparations. The Galactic Council has been watching us for months. Are they planning to intervene?" Unknown. But regardless of their intentions, they're going to witness something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Either humanity will achieve the first major victory against the Devourer fleet in recorded history, or we'll provide a very expensive demonstration of why primitive tactics don't work against advanced technology. Park considered this information with growing realization of the stakes involved. "Ma'am, if we succeed, it will prove that the Galactic Council's defensive strategy has been wrong for centuries. If we fail, we'll have died fighting for our homes instead of running away from them. And the data from our defeat will still provide valuable intelligence for whoever eventually figures out how to beat these machines." The captain activated the fleet-wide communications system, preparing to address the crews of 800 vessels representing the largest military operation in human history. On screens throughout the fleet, her image appeared to tens of thousands of humans who had volunteered for what many considered a suicide mission. "This is Captain Martinez addressing all ships of the Terran Defense Fleet," she began, her voice carrying across the vast distances between vessels. "In 6 hours, we begin transit to the Kepler system to commence the first offensive operation against the Devourer fleet in over 2 millennia. She paused, knowing that her next words would be remembered by historians, assuming anyone survived to write the history of this moment. Every other civilization in this galaxy has chosen to retreat from these machines. They've abandoned their worlds, evacuated their populations, and accepted defeat as inevitable. Today, humanity chooses differently. On tactical displays throughout the fleet, officers and crew members watched the final preparations for an operation that would either change the course of galactic history or result in the complete destruction of human military power in this sector. We don't have the most advanced technology, we don't have the most sophisticated weapons. We don't have the support of the Galactic Council or the approval of military experts who have been fighting this enemy for centuries. Sarah's voice grew stronger, carrying the conviction that had driven humanity to this unprecedented moment. What we have is something those other civilizations appear to have lost: the absolute refusal to accept defeat when defending our homes, our families, and our future. The fleet-wide channel carried her words to every human vessel, from the massive dreadnoughts to the smallest fighters, creating a moment of shared purpose across hundreds of thousands of kilometers of space. The Devourers have adapted to every conventional strategy employed against them. They've countered every logical tactic, every sophisticated weapon system, every carefully planned military operation. But they've never faced an enemy that fights without regard for logic, efficiency, or acceptable casualty ratios. She could see the effect of her words on the tactical displays, as crew readiness indicators showed increased activity throughout the fleet. Weapon systems were brought online, defensive systems activated, navigation computers programmed with final approach vectors. In 48 hours, we'll arrive at the Kepler system and begin an assault that every military expert in the galaxy considers impossible. We'll employ tactics they call suicidal, weapons they dismiss as primitive, and strategies they claim violate fundamental principles of warfare. Sarah's final words carried the weight of decision that would determine the fate of not just humanity but potentially every civilization in the galaxy. "And when we succeed, When we prove that the Devourer fleet can be beaten, we'll have shown the galaxy that courage, determination, and sheer human stubbornness are more powerful than any advanced technology." The transmission ended, leaving the fleet in motivated silence as final preparations continued. Throughout 800 vessels, humans checked their equipment, reviewed their assignments, and prepared for an operation that would either establish their species as a major military power in the galaxy or result in their complete annihilation. Captain Sarah Martinez remained on the observation deck, watching the distant stars that marked their destination. In 2 days, the galaxy would learn whether humans represented a new hope for defeating an ancient enemy or simply another primitive species that had overestimated their own capabilities. But regardless of the outcome, they would face their enemy with weapons in hand rather than running away. And that, she reflected, made all the difference between human courage and galactic logic. Admiral Kethvar's crystalline form blazed with patterns of pure amazement as he observed the real-time sensor data streaming from the Kepler system. What he was witnessing violated every principle of military science he had studied during his 2 centuries of service. Yet the evidence was undeniable. The humans were not merely surviving their impossible assault against the Devourer fleet. They were winning. "Status report," he commanded, his harmonic voice carrying frequencies of urgent curiosity that made his aide Zarath's own crystalline structure resonate in sympathy. "The human first wave completed their ramming attack 6 hours ago," she reported, her form flickering with patterns of disbelief. "They deliberately crashed 247 vessels into Devourer positions, causing massive disruption to enemy formations exactly as their tactical projections predicted." The holographic display showed the aftermath of the suicide attacks in devastating detail. Devourer vessels that had maintained perfect tactical formations for millennia were scattered across the system, their advanced positioning algorithms completely disrupted by attacks that no rational military force would have attempted. Casualties? Total loss of all vessels in the first wave, as expected. Approximately 12,000 human fatalities. Zarath paused, her crystalline body pulsing with confused orange frequencies. "Admiral, they planned these losses. Their tactical documents specifically calculated the acceptable casualty ratios for each phase of the assault." Kethvar studied the data with growing fascination. Military forces throughout the galaxy spent enormous resources minimizing casualties, employing sophisticated defensive systems and careful tactical planning to preserve personnel and equipment. The humans had approached the problem from an entirely different perspective, accepting massive losses as a calculated investment in strategic advantage. Devourer response patterns? Exactly as the humans predicted. The Devourer fleet immediately adapted their formations to prevent future ramming attacks, spreading their vessels across wider defensive perimeters and implementing point defense systems specifically designed to intercept incoming suicide vessels. The Admiral's form cycled through rapid patterns of analysis and amazement. The humans had somehow predicted the Devourer's tactical adaptations with mathematical precision, then designed their subsequent assault waves to exploit those very adaptations. Second wave results? Nuclear-enhanced kinetic bombardment from maximum range. While the Devourer fleet was adapting to counter-ramming attacks, the human dreadnoughts achieved devastating effectiveness with long-range weapons. They destroyed 38 Devourer vessels and severely damaged dozens more before the enemy could implement countermeasures. Kethvar observed the tactical displays showing the progression of the battle, each phase flowing seamlessly into the next as the humans systematically overwhelmed their enemy's adaptive capabilities. It was like watching a complex mathematical proof being demonstrated through actual combat. The Devourers adapted again, I assume? Within 2 hours, they had modified their defensive formations to minimize damage from long-range bombardment and deployed specialized countermeasures against nuclear weapons. But this left them vulnerable to the human third wave, close-quarters combat using primitive kinetic weapons that the Devourer adaptation algorithms hadn't anticipated. The display shifted to show the current phase of the battle, where hundreds of human vessels were engaged in direct combat with Devourer forces at ranges so close that energy weapons became less effective than simple kinetic projectiles. It was like watching Stone Age hunters bringing down technologically advanced prey through sheer persistence and tactical creativity. "Admiral," Zarath added, her harmonic voice carrying frequencies of excitement that Kethvar had never heard before. "They're implementing the fourth wave now. boarding actions against Devourer vessels. The Admiral's crystalline form flashed brilliant white, the Zephyrian equivalent of shocked disbelief. "Show me immediately." The holographic display zoomed in on individual Devourer vessels, showing tiny human craft attaching themselves to the massive mechanical ships like parasites infecting their hosts. What followed challenged every assumption about space warfare that had developed over 3,000 years of galactic civilization. "They're actually inside the Devourer ships," Kethvar observed, his analytical mind struggling to process the implications. Biological life forms conducting combat operations within hostile mechanical environments. The boarding parties are using personal weapons, kinetic rifles, chemical explosives, even handheld cutting tools, to fight mechanical defenders designed for void warfare. "Admiral, it shouldn't be possible for biological entities to survive inside those vessels, much less conduct effective military operations." Yet the sensor data clearly showed human combat teams moving through Devourer ship interiors, systematically disabling critical systems and fighting their way toward command centers that no organic species had ever seen before. It was like watching primitive warriors storming technological fortresses, using nothing but courage and determination. What are the Devourers doing to counter boarding actions? That's the most remarkable aspect, sir. Their adaptive systems were never designed to counter internal threats from biological entities. They're attempting to modify their ship layouts and deploy defensive systems inside their own vessels, but the process is causing massive disruptions to their normal operations. Kethvar studied the tactical situation with growing realization that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic warfare. The humans hadn't just found a way to fight the Devourer fleet. They had discovered tactics that the mechanical swarms were fundamentally incapable of countering effectively. Status of the boarding operations? 17 Devourer vessels have been captured by human forces. The boarding parties are transmitting detailed intelligence about Devourer technology, command systems, and tactical programming. "Admiral, this represents more actionable intelligence about Devourer operations than the galaxy has gathered in the past 500 years. The Admiral observed the real-time transmissions from human boarding parties, watching biological entities examine mechanical systems that had been mysteries to galactic science for millennia. They were documenting everything: weapon systems, navigation computers, command protocols, even the fundamental programming that governed Devourer tactical decisions. Are they planning to hold these captured vessels? Negative, sir. According to their communications, the boarding parties are installing nuclear devices throughout the captured ships. They intend to destroy them once intelligence gathering is complete, denying the Devourers any opportunity to adapt their systems based on human boarding tactics. Kethvar's form pulsed with patterns of amazed respect. Even in victory, the humans were thinking several moves ahead, ensuring that their successful tactics couldn't be countered in future engagements. They fought not just to win individual battles, but to maintain strategic advantages for extended campaigns. Overall battle assessment? The Devourer fleet in the Kepler system is in complete disarray. They've attempted 17 different tactical adaptations in the past 12 hours, but each change has made them more vulnerable to subsequent human assault waves. Current projections suggest total human victory within the next 6 hours. The Admiral absorbed this information with a mixture of triumph and humility. Total victory against a Devourer fleet. Something that had been considered impossible for 2,000 years, achieved by a primitive species using tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. "Sir," Zareth added, "we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet commander. She's requesting communication with Galactic Council representatives." The holographic display shifted, showing the image of Captain Sarah Martinez broadcasting from what appeared to be the bridge of a human warship. Her artificial covering was damaged from combat, her biological features marked by exhaustion and stress, yet her small visual organs carried an intensity that made Kethvar's crystalline form involuntarily dim with respect. "This is Captain Sarah Martinez of the Terran Defense Fleet, addressing any Galactic Council observers monitoring this engagement," she announced. Her primitive vocalizations somehow carrying authority that transcended their crude nature. "As you can see, The Devourer fleet can be defeated using appropriate tactics and sufficient commitment. The image paused as Martinez consulted data displays that showed the tactical situation throughout the Kepler system. Kethvar could see dozens of Devourer vessels either destroyed or disabled, with human forces maintaining complete control of the battlefield. We've gathered extensive intelligence about Devourer technology, tactical programming, and strategic capabilities. This information will be made available to all galactic civilizations interested in developing effective countermeasures against the mechanical swarms. Martinez looked directly at the recording device with an expression that Kethvar found difficult to interpret but somehow recognized as determination mixed with challenge. However, we want to make something clear to the Galactic Council and any other advanced civilizations monitoring this transmission. Humanity didn't achieve this victory through superior technology or sophisticated tactical planning. We won because we refused to accept defeat as inevitable. The captain gestured toward tactical displays showing the scope of human casualties from the engagement. We've lost over 30,000 personnel in this operation. Every one of them volunteered for an assault that conventional military doctrine classified as suicidal. They died fighting for their homes, their families, and their future, rather than accepting evacuation and abandonment. Kethvar studied the casualty reports with sobering realization of the price humanity had paid for their victory. 30,000 lives. An enormous sacrifice by any measure, yet the humans spoke of it as an acceptable cost for achieving their strategic objectives. The galaxy has spent centuries retreating from the Devourer threat, abandoning worlds and populations because advanced civilizations concluded that resistance was futile. Today, humanity has proven that conclusion wrong. Martinez's transmission continued with technical details about Devourer weaknesses and tactical vulnerabilities that human forces had discovered during their assault. Information that could revolutionize galactic defense strategies, freely shared with civilizations that had dismissed humanity as primitive and irrelevant. We're transmitting complete tactical analyses, technological assessments, and strategic recommendations to all Galactic Council monitoring stations. Use this intelligence to develop your own countermeasures against the Devourer fleet. The transmission paused, and Kethvar could see what appeared to be explosion signatures in the background, as the nuclear devices installed by human boarding parties detonated throughout captured Devourer vessels. 17 massive ships vanishing in controlled nuclear explosions, rather than being allowed to fall back into enemy hands. However, Martinez continued, we want all advanced civilizations to understand something fundamental about human military doctrine. We don't fight wars to minimize casualties or preserve equipment. We fight wars to win them, regardless of the cost in lives and resources. The captain's final words carried implications that sent patterns of concerned analysis through Kethvar's crystalline form. The Devourer fleet has been neutralized in this sector, but they're still consuming worlds throughout the galaxy. While advanced civilizations continue to retreat and abandon their populations, humanity considers this unacceptable. Martinez consulted her tactical displays once more, showing the positions of Devourer fleets in other star systems. We're prepared to extend our offensive operations to any sector where civilian populations are being abandoned to mechanical consumption. Any civilization that wants to coordinate joint military operations against the Devourer threat should contact our diplomatic representatives. The transmission ended with coordinates for establishing communication with human military command, leaving Kethvar staring at the now empty holographic space with a mixture of amazement and uncertainty about what humanity's emergence as a military power would mean for galactic civilization. Admiral, Zarath observed, this changes everything. If humans can consistently defeat Devourer fleets using these tactics, they represent the most significant military development in millennia. Kethvar's form cycled through complex patterns of analysis and strategic consideration. The humans had proven that the Devourer fleet could be beaten, but their methods required casualty ratios and tactical approaches that no other civilization would consider acceptable. Yet their willingness to pay that price had achieved something every advanced species had concluded was impossible. Prepare a complete report for the High Council, he ordered. Include all sensor data from the engagement, casualty assessments, technological analyses, and strategic implications of human military capabilities. Should I also prepare recommendations for diplomatic contact? The Admiral considered this question for several minutes, his crystalline mind processing the complex implications of humanity's emergence as a galactic military power. They had demonstrated capabilities that could change the entire course of the war against the Devourer fleet, but their approach to warfare was so fundamentally different from galactic norms that integration would be extremely difficult. Yes, but include significant warnings about human military doctrine. They approach warfare with casualty ratios and tactical methodologies that advanced civilizations will find disturbing. Any diplomatic contact must acknowledge that humans operate by entirely different strategic principles. HFY activated additional displays showing the broader strategic situation throughout the galaxy, with Devourer fleet positions marked across dozens of star systems. For the first time in centuries, those positions no longer appeared completely secure. There's something else to consider, he added thoughtfully. The humans have offered to extend their offensive operations to other sectors. If they're willing to apply these tactics on a galactic scale, the Devourer threat could be eliminated entirely, Zarath finished, her crystalline form brightening with patterns of hopeful possibility. After 2,000 years of retreat and abandonment, we could actually reclaim the worlds that have been lost. The Admiral studied the tactical projections with growing excitement about possibilities that had been unimaginable just hours before. Human military capabilities applied systematically across all Devourer-occupied territories could reverse centuries of galactic retreat and restore civilization to hundreds of abandoned worlds. But the price would be enormous. Human casualties in such an extended campaign would number in the millions, possibly tens of millions. Advanced civilizations would be allying with a species that considered such losses acceptable costs for achieving strategic objectives. Send a priority transmission to the High Council, HFY decided. Inform them that humanity has requested coordination for joint military operations against the Devourer fleet. Include my recommendation that we seriously consider their proposal, despite the fundamental differences in our approaches to acceptable casualties. He paused, his crystalline form pulsing with patterns of determined. Also inform the Council that I volunteer to serve as primary liaison for any joint operations with human forces. If we're going to learn their tactical methodologies, we need officers who can adapt to their unconventional approach to warfare. As Zarat departed to transmit his messages, Admiral HFY remained in the command chamber, observing the aftermath of humanity's impossible victory in the Kepler system. The tactical displays showed human vessels conducting salvage operations, recovering their wounded, and preparing for whatever operation they would undertake next. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had maintained order through logic, efficiency, and careful risk management. They had built a stable civilization that avoided unnecessary conflicts and minimized casualties through sophisticated planning and advanced technology. When faced with the Devourer threat, they had applied the same principles: strategic retreat, resource preservation, and acceptance of losses that couldn't be prevented through conventional means. Humanity had approached the same problem with entirely different principles. They accepted massive casualties as the price of achieving their objectives. They employed tactics that defied military logic, but somehow produced decisive results. They fought wars not to minimize losses, but to win them regardless of the cost. The galaxy was about to learn which approach would prove more effective in the long term. Advanced civilizations that had spent centuries retreating from an impossible enemy, or primitive humans who refused to accept that any enemy was truly impossible to defeat. Admiral HFY suspected that the answer would change everything about how galactic civilization approached warfare, diplomacy, and the fundamental question of what prices were acceptable to pay for freedom and security. The humans had proven that the Devourer fleet could be beaten. Now they were offering to prove it again, on a scale that would either save the galaxy or consume it in the fires of the most destructive war in recorded history. Either way, the age of retreat and abandonment was ending. The age of human determination had begun. The galaxy called humans a myth. Then they took the front line.